these are possible examples. And if there are others, by the way, I've been, but nothing in principle that says that. Before we suggested that you could communicate ostensibly, first more or less taken for granted that all communication was signaling, and that if you saw communication, there had to be signals in conversely. So we say, oh no, but there's another way, and quite a lot of communication which turns out to be of that kind. There's no reason to exclude that there may be still other ways to communicate, especially now we're looking at communication across species. So where there may be forms of communication that we are not, nobody has much thought about. So that's the answer to the blank space in figure 2.
Okay, thank you. So you wouldn't want to include in that blank space cases where there's an informative intention, a human informative intention, but no communicative intention, like leaving the lights on for the burglars. I agree with you about your accent case, but I don't think you've got an informative intention there. In the lights, leaving the lights on case, yes, you have got an informative intention. It's and it's probably quite effective. It gets the result you want. The burglars are deterred and so on and so forth. But the key thing there, I suppose you would want to say, is that there's no mutually adjusted competencies.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and the reason why I gave both intentional and unintentional, because again, most of the communication in the world, among bacteria, among animals, insects, and so on, is not intentional. So again, you can define. I think Charles does. You can say, no, for me, communication is intentional. You may want, and we're all more interested here in intentional communication than in other forms. But standardly, communication is defined independently of intention. So I would be to fill the gap, if you want, of the blank space in the diagram. I'm more looking towards unintentional things, and nice if they also have intentional counterpart like quorum sensing and voting.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Great.
Yes. So we're moving to actually more Robin.
Charles has a question.
Oh, okay, Charles. Well, hello, Charles. Please, you unmute yourself. Unmute yourself, please. You're muted. Charles, you are muted. We can't hear you. Can someone... hello, Charles, we can't hear you.
Charles, you're muted. You're muted.
No.
Can someone send him a message? You are muted. We can't hear you.
I think he has unmuted himself, but it's working.
Oh.
There's no...
Yeah, thank you, Bill. But no, I'm sorry, Charles. We cannot hear you. I'd love to answer you. We cannot hear you. Can you hear me? Please nod if you can hear me. You can hear me? But we cannot hear you. There's a problem. So it's a pity. I'm sorry, because already we felt somewhat. We are sorry that we were not in a position to answer all of Charles' comments more than questions. But when he does present one orally, I can't answer it. It's a pity. Okay, but that's the way it goes. Okay, let's continue. Maybe Charles, if you find a way to start your sound, we can return to your questions later on. Okay, so I was moving to the next set of questions, which are actually one question from Robin. We'll return to other relationship, other issues involving Grice in another slide, but that was just about ostension in general, not the basic versus mentalistic ostension contrast. And Robin writes, you point out that Grice never talks of ostension. Yet quite a few people seem to run the Gricean account of meaning and mentalistic ostensive communication together as broadly Gricean. And you mentioned Fitch, Moore, and Bauer. I saw that Richard is here, and he also uses talking particular of apes minimally, Grayson. So Grice, I'm again quoting Robin, Grice excluded direct observational evidence type cases. For instance, St. John's had presented to Salome on a platter from his meaning and non-natural meaning. How would you characterize the relation between A, Grayson meaning NN with its free closed definition and is concerned with the kind of evidence used by the receiver, and B, ostension both basic and mentalistic? Again, the Grice's definition of meaning. Let me go back a bit. So Grice has two theories, which have been distinguished by us, but very clearly by Stephen Neal and so on. So a theory of meaning, a theory of communication. The theory of communication is in the service of his theory of meaning. His main interest is theory of meaning. But to support it, to answer objections, to make use of it for some of his other philosophical agenda, for instance, for the interpretation of connectives in natural language. And we have a comment from Richard Mood to all of us. I will read the comment. That's a good question. Someone should write a paper on it. Haha. Richard, please go ahead. Write a paper. I mean. So he has these two theories, with the theory of communication in the service of a theory of meaning. Indeed, there is not only does he not use the word ostension, that's not important, he has no interest in that, because ostension, we use it, in fact, we developed as a replacement for his theory of conversation, of communication, with which we were in disagreement. We were very much inspired by his theory of meaning, and we found his theory of communication, that is the cooperative principle and the maxims, wanting. So ostension came as an alternative to his theory of conversation. He was aware of our work. He didn't seem to approve of it very much. He didn't say anything aggressive, but at least sounded a bit skeptical in the only comment he ever made on it. He clearly, he was not. So I assume he was aware of the idea of ostension as we developed it, and he didn't think it was his own ideas with a different word, a different name, or that it was a good alternative. So the relationship between Grayson meaning, non-natural meaning, on the one hand, and ostension, mentalistic ostension, is that we think that mentalistic ostension is a good alternative to Grice's theory of conversation. That's the basic view. But ostension itself, and that's what we didn't. So the thing is, we started from linguistic pragmatics. That was our initial interest. So we were basically concerned with verbal communication, and as Grice had done, and others had done too, looking beyond that, and not in detail, and indeed using more and more cases of non-verbal communication to make our points. But our main focus of interest, a point that actually Charles made in his comments, but certainly not our only focus, was indeed verbal communication, which involves Grayson meaning, typically. So what we realized, and that's why we wrote this paper, is first that probably first we hadn't realized that it applied beyond the case where you had beyond mentalistic communication, that there was nothing in our definition of ostension that restricted it to the mentalistic cases. I mean, again, take the definition with which I started the presentation. You can apply it to relevance for book, the initial version as it is. I mean, what we describe as ostension is ostension in this sense, then we go on to say, then we just focus on mentalistic cases. And what all the subtleties which I'll come to because they arise later in answering your questions. So that's the basic thing. Now there is the interesting fact that indeed a number of authors, and there are quite a few more than Fitch, Moore, and Barn, tend to see ostension as a crisis phenomena. Form of crisis communication. Well, so the two as largely not overlapping because we think when it's mentalistic they do overlap, but as more or less the same thing with nuances, more or less important nuance between. And I don't understand where they get it. I don't get it. First, there are two sides to it. One side is so they either misunderstand our view of ostension, or they misunderstand Grice account, or a bit of both, possibly. Regarding misunderstanding our relevant theory, well, too bad. We'll keep trying to explain it to the best of our capacities. I think it's to a large extent a problem of Gricean scholarship. It's just, I think, this seeing what Grice does as a discussion of ostensive communication in our sense is misunderstanding Grice. It's attributing to him ideas that he not only didn't have, but that we have good reason to think he would have rejected. It's not that important to us, but it's not indifferent either. We should, by the way, take some responsibilities in the sense that we didn't sharply enough. We didn't highlighted the difference between our approach and Grice's regarding the theory of conversation, but maybe not clearly enough. We are eager to also to express our gratitude and our debt to Grice, which is quite important. But maybe we should have underscored more clearly, not just in our writing, maybe even in our mind, the points of sharp differences. But we did a few. So anyhow, clearly, we should accept, say we were not clear enough about it. Okay. So that's does that answer your question, Robin?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, thanks, Dan. It answers it sufficiently for the time being. I gather this is what will be the focus of the other paper that I think you mentioned. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I will await that with interest. But yeah, I guess I have had this, because I started to read people like Richard Moore and Dorit and Fitch to some extent. I kept noticing this talk where it seemed as if ostensive communication was dubbed as being broadly Gricean. And so I was just keen to get the connection. And I have assumed that the third clause of, we probably don't want to go into this kind of detail, but that the third clause in Grice's definition is something that would certainly not play a role in your general characterization of ostensive communication, which includes all these cases of showing and what have you.
Yeah. But by the way, Richard, if you want to have a word here, it would be appropriate. Yes.
So